Ready?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Incoming RC. My name's Lucas Weakley, and today we're going to be reviewing a plane that HobbyKing sent me, and it's one of their new little sport gliders that they just recently came out with called the Super Kinetic 815. So let's jump right in. Now, right out of the box, this plane was super easy to assemble. It came in three main parts: the fuselage, the wing, and the elevator. Now, the wing, all you had to do was slot it in on the back and then clip it in on the front. And for the elevator, all you have to do is slide in one side and then the other side clicks onto the plastic shaft that's in the elevator. The build construction for this airplane is really great. The wing barely flexes and it's very rigid. All the control surfaces are very rigid as well. They barely have any play in them. The only part of the plane that's a little bit flimsy is maybe the neck of the tail, but that's pretty much it. The entire plane is really well constructed. This plane has an 815 millimeter wingspan, hence the name, a 1000 kV brushless outrunner motor with a 20 amp ESC and a 9x6 folding prop. Now, I know I don't have a folding prop on this right now, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. It has full aileron, elevator, and rudder control, even though I don't use the rudder very much except for in landings, because this is pretty much just a bank and yank airplane. And speaking of flying, let's go fly. A couple things that I learned while I was flying the airplane is that you need to maintain a fast speed while flying. The control surfaces shouldn't move very much while you're flying as well. And also the plane glides very well in a straight line, but it has to be fast. And if you go into a turn, you have to apply power. And then when you're coming in for a landing, get to the far end of your field, kill the power, get in a straight glide, and then really slowly bring it in for a landing, and then try to land it in grass. If you can't, there's these little plastic pieces underneath, and they'll protect it from going on pavement, from scuffing up the foam. And just land really slowly and land it fast too. You don't want it to tip stall out while it's coming in the landing and then crash. Talking about the control surfaces movement a little bit more, the aileron control is the only one really, when you get it out of the box, that's a little bit too much. So what I did is I set the aileron control to have 50% dual rate, so it's moving half as much as it normally would, and I put it at 100% expo. Now, this gives me great authority when I'm turning and moving the sticks a little bit, but then when I want to do a roll or an acrobatic, I can move the stick all the way to the end and I can get great authority, and the roll rate's really good too. Now, for the elevator, it actually has a little bit too little throw. So when you're at a lower speed, you might have trouble pulling up, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's fixed at a certain rate with the full flying elevator. But what I did is I put 50% expo at 100% dual rates, so that when I'm in going fast turns and other maneuvers like that, I can pull up and inside the stick and it won't move that much. And then when I get towards the outside, then it starts moving more. And did the same thing with the rudder, just so that I didn't bump it while I'm going into maneuvers and it messed up how I was turning. The only reason I used the rudder was in landing, so I could line myself up with the runway. Now, the CG of the airplane is very important, and this is a kind of interesting plane when you talk about CG. So what I did is, in the instruction manual, it tells you how far back from the center of the edge of the wing to measure to get the CG, and I've marked that point right here. Now, one interesting thing is if I hold my hands up to this point, the plane is already pretty much perfectly balanced at that point without a battery in it. And the battery bay is right here, slightly farther back of the CG. So what you have to do is you have to slide the battery all the way up forward in order to get the proper CG. Now, once you get that, then the plane flies great, but you just have to keep that in mind that the battery has to go all the way far forward so you get the proper CG, and do check it if you're going to fly, because this plane is pretty squirrely when it's tail heavy. So HobbyKing sent me 2 batteries to go with this airplane, a Zippy Compact 850 milliamp hour 3-cell and a Turnigy Nanotech 850 3-cell. And both of these batteries were great. The Zippy was obviously a little bit smaller than the Nanotech, so it fit in the front of the cavity really well. The Nanotech just took up the entire area, and it was fine too. The Zippy, they both performed the same way. The Zippy had a little bit shorter flight time, but it was barely noticeable. So like I said before, this plane likes to fly fast. And one thing that I was doing while I was first flying and learning how to fly this plane was that I was keeping it low and slow, because I didn't want to get it too fast or ruin it when I was first flying. But what I found out was that it tip stalls really easily at a slow rate. And with the added movement of the control surfaces being too much, I crashed it a whole bunch. So what I did is I fixed the control surfaces so they move less, and you just have to gun it. It has to have a lot of power, and it has to fly pretty fast. And don't worry about how fast it is. Fly it in a big field. I tried flying it in my backyard. It was not big enough, even though I am able to fly my maker trainer back there. But anyway, fly it in a big field, keep it above half throttle, and that's when it's good in the turns. You can glide in a straight line pretty well, but in turns, make sure you give it throttle or else it's going to tip stall out on you. One major pet peeve that I have with this airplane is the elevator and the mechanism that it goes with. Now, the mechanism inside the airplane is really great, but when I was first learning how to fly this plane and crashing a whole bunch, I learned that if you come in for a landing that's a little bit harder than normal, or if the plane just falls and smacks the ground, the elevator breaks every single time. And this is really annoying because the elevator is pretty hard to fix. It's just a little piece of plastic. And what I ended up doing most of the time was just CAing it. And then one of the times it broke really bad, and it broke right at the edge, so I had nowhere to CA. So what I did is I drilled a hole, installed a carbon rod, and I drilled a hole into the plastic piece too and installed the carbon rod in there, CA'd it all together, and then that held pretty well, but it's breaking around the tip every time I come in for a rough landing. So it's pretty easy to fix as long as you have good CA around. The only real way to permanently fix this is if you cut out all that plastic and then you put in a big carbon spar that's the same square shape as the mechanism is, and fit that in there, and that would be the only way to fix it properly, because the little plastic piece isn't strong enough to cope with rougher landings or even a crash. Like I said before, the propeller that I have on it right now is not the one that it originally came with. The one that it originally came with was a folding propeller with a plastic spinner, and this is the one that you see in the picture and on the box. Anyway, it was made out of pretty weak plastic, so when I came in for one of the crashes before, it broke the prop, which wasn't really an issue. I knew that was kind of going to happen, so I went to the hobby shop, bought a folding prop, installed it, and it was fine. One thing that I was noticing is that the spinner is really brittle, and it has 2 little screws that go through it, and the standoffs just broke off. And if I were to glue that back together, then I wouldn't be able to get it apart again, and I couldn't tighten it on the motor shaft. So what I did is I just got a normal spinner and a normal prop and put it onto the shaft, and I'm just spinning it like that. Now that's a pretty easy fix, but one thing that you have to keep in mind is that a folding prop produces less power than its counterpart fixed prop. So even though that the folding prop was a 9x6, putting on a 9x6 prop here gives it way more power, and it's actually pulling more amps, and it's putting more stress on the airframe. So if you're going to change out your propeller to something that's solid, then I'd go for something that's at a slower pitch. So like a 9x4 or an 8x6. Now, I originally assumed the problems that I was facing with the Kinetic, like the elevator and the propeller, were only happening to me. But after looking on HobbyKing's website, the only replacement parts for the Kinetic that were back ordered are the elevator and the propeller. So obviously other people are having this problem. Now that's not really a big deal. You can always order the back ordered parts, but it's not that hard to fix, as I've told you before, and it's pretty easy to overcome these problems. One more modification that I did to the plane is I put a little piece of tape on the front of the battery tray. This kept on flying off every time I was flying because the magnet in the back wasn't holding very well. Also, there's this little lip right here, and when you put the battery all the way up into the front of the cavity, this little lip gets depressed and it's pushed out. So it's putting tension on the magnet, and the second that you hit a bump in the air, it just flies off. Also, another thing I did is I put little finger grips on the side so I wasn't gouging out the foam every time I was going to find a seam and take off the battery cover. I love the artwork on this airplane. The decals are really nice. I love the color scheme. It's really easy to differentiate the top from the bottom. You can see these black straight lines and then these red and orange and black diagonal lines. And the decals are really thin. They're really well put on. I really like them and I love the color scheme. So overall, I really like this plane. It looks great, it flies great, and I love taking it out to the flying field and then flying it around and smoking little strikers and other EDF jets that are more expensive. And people come by and say, "What is this?" And it's just an awesome all-around plane. The only pet peeves that I have are the elevator and the propeller, but you can fix those relatively easily or just buy the replacement parts from HobbyKing. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the review and hope you'll stop by for more later. Thanks for watching. Bye.